Okay, so officially, we're gonna be done with this book, but I want to encourage you all to read the rest, or at least read the chapters that look interesting to you. Now, so far, even if Rhoda has argued successfully for everything he said he would, he's only gotten us maybe to a necessary being that's extraordinarily intelligent and created the universe. Now, that's pretty close to something like God, but to get to Christianity, so that, I mean, and if you're a Muslim or a Jew or just like a generic, you know, American that loves, patriotism in God, God-fearing country, then you're going to be a you're going to, it'll support that, but it's not going to support Christianity in particular. Um, so, what's going to be support for Christianity in particular? And that's going to be chapter 11 on the historical evidence for Christianity, the resurrection. Now, this might surprise you, but there's been a lot of work on historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus in particular. Um, and what I've done is I've went ahead and made notes on the next chapter, actually the chapters 11 and 12, but I'm not going to require for you to, I'm not going to test on this. And the reason is because it's more history, and I'm not a history professor, and this is not a history class. So, but actually, I recommend you go read it just because it's interesting. If you look at the Bible not as the Word of God, but just as a group, a bunch of texts, what can we learn historically? We can learn historically a lot about the past, about Julius Caesar, whether maybe he crossed the Rubicon, and so forth. I mean, we glean a lot of information historically, and there are some scholars who are trying to argue that from these historical evidences, we can argue that Jesus rose from the dead. Now that's summarized in chapter 11, and I encourage you to read it and think about it. You might end up disagreeing, and that's how this class is. And so, yeah, that'll be the book. And then he has the last three chapters. I actually haven't read them. That's supposed to be illustrating saying yes to God. So, yeah, so take a step back and think about it, and think about what has Rhoda convinced you of. Uh, Rhoda, at minimum, might have convinced you that it's better to live some religious life than not, on the basis of his first Pascal's wager. That maybe he convinced you then that like living a religious life is better than a secular life for you. Some of you might not be convinced. Some of you might be more convinced, although from the discussions it doesn't seem that many people are convinced. But he might have convinced you that that Christianity in particular is 50% likely to be true, or that maybe just some theistic religion, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, is likely to be true, and so it's reasonable to live one of those paths. Yeah, that's also a possibility. So yeah, think about it. This is all like kind of relevant to real life. Um, Last point is, so next we'll be going into this book, Science and Religion. But to end, I'm also attaching to the playlist another video, purely optional, where two scholars debate about the historical evidence of the resurrection. There's a lot of debates on YouTube that are interesting. In this one, it's particularly interesting because it's between a Christian scholar and a Muslim scholar. And they're debating whether the historical evidence supports believing that Jesus rose from the dead. Again, purely optional. I'm not going to test you on it. It's more just I want you guys to keep learning about stuff, and I think it's valuable to keep learning about stuff. So, okay, with that, that's the end, and we'll be going. I'll be giving the next reading assignment in Blackboard. So, peace.